Hello, welcome to the video series of the Association of Sustainable Development Experts on ESG requirements of international investors and development banks. ASDE is a community of ESG experts. It was founded in Ukraine, Kiev in 2020, and it brings together professionals from the country and abroad for peer-to-peer learning and exchange on implementing upcoming ESG requirements from EU and from the global best practices. My name is Tetyana Gерлінг. I'm the member of the advisory board of ASDE. I work in ESG risk assessment and management in sustainable development finance. I have experience in sectors agribusiness, energy, working with supply chains, and blue economy. Currently, I look in details at ESG integration in the corporate management systems, my special interest in the social aspect in gender lens investing and generating social impact. I encourage you to get in touch with me through my LinkedIn profile and share your recommendations as well as feedback on these videos. This video series is the second part of the first module started by my colleague and the ASDE advisory board member Evgenia Afanasenko. She recorded 4 videos earlier this year in the Ukrainian language, which goes in details and provides a solid and comprehensive introduction into what are ESG requirements of the development banks. She takes example of the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. She looks at the emerging regulation of the European Union, which is considered to be one of the most robust in the world when it comes to environmental and social requirements, and she looks what it means actually for the clients in Ukraine and emerging economies. Evgenia also looked into biodiversity and environmental standards of the development banks in her 2 videos. You find her videos on this ASDE YouTube channel, and I encourage you to watch them. They're quite comprehensive and you can find a lot of information and details there. When it comes to my 4 videos that I recorded, I decided to focus first more on social side of the ESG requirements. The second, I decided that I would focus on practical implementation of the standards. They're complex, especially for the first time investees of development banks, who sometimes doesn't know where to start because there are a lot of information, a lot of materials, but those who are not yet so experienced, they struggle a bit where to start. So in this video, I will pretty much focus on where they can start, what the first steps can be. Here is the overview of my 4 videos. That's the first one, where I look specifically at what are ESG requirements, but again, more from a practical perspective, and what is ESG accountability in the organization. I will use examples from my experience to show who is responsible for ESG and how ESG accountability can and should be distributed through the organization, and share a couple of resources that you can use after this video. Let me start first looking at what is the difference between development banks and commercial banks. That's sometimes the first question I'm asked as an ESG professional working with the clients. Commercial banks usually operate within the existing regulatory scheme when it comes to financial compliance and in particular environmental and social requirements. It's usually short to medium-term finance, and the most important indicator is whether this investment can generate financial profit. And that is different to a bit, I would say, to the development bank focus. Why? Because development bank also integrate a more broader social benefit for the and for the community. They normally, one of their mandates is not only generate positive financial returns, but it also sets to implement new requirements at the national and international level. For example, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions or eliminations of human rights risks in the supply chain, speaking about the new EU directive that was adopted recently. In order to facilitate those changes, the development banks are proactive in offering companies and asking them to comply with these requirements through improving management, environmental and social management systems. It's normally medium to long-term finance because introducing those changes requires time. And it also comes with social advisory. What does it mean? It means that those banks come with the teams of environmental and social experts, technical assistance experts, who help the company to analyze where they're standing in terms of environmental and social compliance and improvements, and helping them to implement those improvements. Looking at the ESG standards of the development banks, I would say they're all geared towards implementing a comprehensive environmental and social management systems within the company in order to reduce their financial risks, improve their stability of the operations. In my 4 videos, I'll focus more on social risks and standards, but I will start from the corporate governance because for me as a practitioner, it's absolutely a must that the accountability and responsibility for any kind of ESG risk management is clearly anchored in the organization. And for me, it means that it's not just hiring one person. However, before I give you an example of what I mean, I would like to do a bit of a recap on what are ESG standards of the development banks. And I will use example of, let's say, classical example of the World Bank standards. Those of you who work with development banks should know it very well, but those who not, these 8 standards were developed by the subsidiary of the World Bank called International Financial Corporation, and they are designed specifically for investments in the private companies. How they're structured? First of all, the skeleton, right? The first standard is whether the company has the system to assess and manage environmental and social risk and systems. It's a bit of a skeleton, and everything boils down primarily to implementation of this requirement. Other 7 are pretty much specifying how the first one should be implemented. For example, labor risks and working conditions. It goes into details how to eliminate risks and manage them on a continuous basis within the company. We'll go into this topic in detail in my second video. The next one is resource efficiency and pollution prevention. I won't go into details here. However, I would like to mention that this is, from my experience, that standard is the one where most of the companies have more or less, to a certain degree, established systems, because there are quite some good, say, tailored solutions like ISO 14000 certifications, environmental management system certifications for companies. Those who comply with it may have a good start. There are, of course, nitty-gritties there, but normally many companies feel pretty comfortable to talk at least about it when you start working with them. I won't go into this standard in my videos in detail. Instead, again, I will continue in my videos looking at the social angle, which is how the company takes into account risks it creates for the communities nearby, but also risk the communities nearby create for the companies. It also includes risks associated with, for example, company acquiring new land to build a new factory or set up a new field, production agricultural field. That's also the social impact, and that's where I see many companies are not familiar with, not I would say, comfortable even talk about it because they never were required to manage those risks previously. And I'll go into this topic in my third video. Biodiversity standard on how the company's operations ensure there is no destruction of biodiversity, no destruction of ecosystem services. Evgenia went into detail in her fourth video, and I encourage you to watch it. Indigenous people and cultural heritage impact. For example, the company builds a pipeline or a factory in the area where the tribes of indigenous people have been living normally remote areas for a long time, and the project threatens to destroy the site or let's say the area or the object that they were worshipping, and that plays a very important part of their cultural identity. That's not triggered very often, and I won't go into detail here. Rather focus on performance standard 2, 4, and 5, so that you may feel comfortable using them as they are triggered in most of the investments. However, before I dig into social aspects, let's look at what is it, ESG accountability distribution within the company. When I start working with the companies, I realize that most of them, those who haven't worked with development banks previously, ask questions that could be repetitive, right? Who is in charge of ESG in my company? Is it only ESG manager? We already compliant with all the national requirements. What else should we do and why should we do it? Newly appointed ESG manager is asking the question, I was appointed in charge of it before I was in charge of, let's say, quality, health, and safety. What does it mean for me? What should I do? When they work a bit longer, they ask questions, what are ESG data, how to collect them, and how to manage them, how it's different from the systems we are having now. I would like to answer those questions with one example and using company's organigram. The most important, what I always explain them, the key point is appointing ESG manager, only person in charge of ESG compliance, reporting to investor is not enough, and it's counterproductive. Why? Because that person will be frustrated if other departments in the organization have nothing to do with ESG commitments and continue working as before. It won't get you anywhere. Instead, ESG manager should be pretty much a focal point to collect information on how all departments implement their ESG accountability. What does it mean? Let's say development bank is working with shareholders and owners on their investment. It comes for environmental and social due diligence, and normally it would require the person in the organization to be appointed to provide this data to a development bank. From the experience, I know that usually this person would be assigned to the chief financial officer because it's investor relations and nobody in the organization else is, let's say, interested in it, or it can be assigned to chief quality and safety officer. Why? Because they are the ones who normally handle environmental permits, regulatory reporting, health and safety standards. Seems like the closest area in the whole organization. Is it the right approach? To collect data and channel them to the development bank, it could be the right approach. But is it the right approach to implement environmental and social management systems? I would doubt so. Why? Because ESG accountability spreads through the whole organization. It's like every department is responsible for, let's say, financial efficiency and market success of the company. The same is ESG accountability. Each department should think how efficiently we use the resources, how it can lead to reduction of costs, how do we, let's say, procure our suppliers, subcontractors, how our HR policy look like, do we hire underage workers? Do our suppliers hire underage workers? Normally, that's not a part of the policy and also implemented management systems based on this policy, but that's where most of the requirements from development banks will come to establish such a system. This complicated slide shows my ideal world as an ESG professional, let's say from the perspective of development bank. What does it mean? It means that there are ESG goals and ESG targets for each department. There is an ESG person in charge who just collects it. Besides, in addition to each department, what part should be integrated, and it's usually not, is the one how our customer requirements, suppliers requirements, subcontractors, regulators, and communities fit into the system of our ESG accountability. What does it mean? Typically, when I start working with the client who has never been working with a development bank, I know that outside of the company, the most, I would say, organized relationships on ESG would be with regulators. We're speaking about environmental permits of the company. Could be with customers. For example, the McDonald's would have clear requirement to all its suppliers on having policies. No forced labor, no child labor. Will these policies be necessarily integrated into, let's say, everyday's checks and balances, into how HR hires its workers and verifies them? Maybe yes, maybe no. It can be just a policy because McDonald's required. The second piece is how is, let's say, the policy, no forced labor, no child labor, is implemented to suppliers. For example, let's take the company that's a grain processor and it buys grains, or let's say it's vegetables from the farmers. The farmers hires seasonal workers. Does the company go and oblige the supplier to really implement the policy on no forced labor, no child labor in its operations? Or it's just also a policy, although they even heard about it, right? That would be a typical situation I encounter when I start working with clients sometimes. Then we're speaking about NGOs and communities. Is the company aware what are the typical risks in the sector? Child labor, forced labor, human rights, environmental pollution. Are they preparing public reports and statements based on the evidence, how they actually were avoiding those risks? That all contributes to ESG accountability approach. And if those risks are taken care of consistently, that increase company's robustness, increases its reputation, and prevents a situation when the operation needs to be stopped because there was the complaint lodged against the company, let's say with independent complaints mechanism, or there is the huge campaign against the company in the media, which also, of course, affects its profitability. I want to come back to my initial question, where to place the ESG manager. I hope that by now you see that having an ESG manager is pretty much important, but not the only task that should be. After there is a clear policy, clear targets for each department, the ESG manager is ideally the person who collects the information and also pushes for the change. Ideally, this person is placed in the intersection of the highest risks, supply chains, if you are a processor, and highest influence. What is the mostly influential department in your company? Is it operations? Is it marketing? Is it a financial department? Is it procurement? Because the ESG manager has to report to the person who has the most influence and department in the organization to keep pushing for a change. That, I would say, would be an ideal setting from the development bank perspective. Having given you this very complex and quite comprehensive and ambitious, I would say, system of requirements, I would also like to give you tools. And the most basic of them is the very easy to use and to assess your management system. What are you actually doing now? is the good old Excel tool, which you can download on your computer from the website of IFC and run a very quick scan. It may take you from 10 minutes to 1 hour on how much your company is already implemented in terms of environmental and social risk management. If you download it and fill it out and run it, then you will have a wonderful visual, let's say, graphic representation of whether you are a high performer or you have a lot of work to do in terms of compliance with the ESG requirements of the development banks. Here you see the blue line. This is a company's self-assessment. It can be very nicely within the same file combined with an independent assessment, ESG professional, the development bank, or a specialized consultant, to show how far, let's say, you are from being an ideal, from having an ideal ESG management system. Before you watch next videos, I strongly advise you to use this tool and play with it to assess your company's ESG performance. And before I finish this video, I also would like to recommend you a couple of resources when it comes to ESG accountability within the organization and the job of the Chief Sustainability Officer. It's the book How to Be a Chief Sustainability Officer that was published this year, and actually a great guide on what to do and how to do when you start working as Chief Sustainability Officer, and how to work within your organization to push the ESG agenda forward. It's pretty much to the point, no water, and it's a great guidance, great to have you on your desk. After you went through kind of the key guidances, it's good to have a look at the experiences of Chief Sustainability Officers in various sectors. And the second book that I would like to recommend, Chief Sustainability Officers at Work, is a good compilation of such case studies and examples from which you can learn. With this, I would like to finish my video and do a bridge into the second one that will go live in later this year on social and labor standards. What is important, what to look at, and what are the practical tools you can use to implement robust social and labor standards in your company. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and please share your recommendations and feedbacks from my LinkedIn profile. Thank you.